Okay, well, let me get engaged with something here called the competing values framework. And what I'm going to do is look at how do we understand culture. Culture seems to be a little squishy, a little bit. Let's just give that to human resources. Let's just let them take care of it. And that's really not the role of. You're not really doing your HR people any favors by pushing that off on them. So, especially when we're talking about strategy or strategic change, we really need to include culture in that whole discussion. So the model I'm going to use is called the Competing Values Framework. This comes from a guy by the name of Robert Quinn. I guess the original research. After that, Robert Quinn is the one that's really taken it along. He's done some really cool stuff with it. It really makes a lot of sense. It's a very useful model, even beyond what I'm going to present here in this video. So he did some research, and in this research, as I remember, it was about 37 different things about effective businesses. And he categorized these 37 things into a kind of circle diagram. Yeah. And on one axis, all right, we have flexibility and discretion. So there's a pull towards flexibility and discretion. And at the other end of that axis, we have control. Now, here comes the competing values part of the competing values framework. You can't be totally flexible, but then also totally in control. We have to say, oh, wait, which one do we really need? So you can imagine, a chip manufacturer like ASML, where you've got to have, clean rooms and Six Sigma and all this kind of stuff. They're going to be more toward control. Of course, they need to have more, they need to have some flexibility and some discretion about day-to-day problems or moving in directions of research and development. But on balance, when that axis competes, we're going to go more toward control and less toward flexibility and discretion. A company like, let's say, Apple, who is really focused on marketing, product development, these kinds of things, they're going to go a little bit more toward flexibility and discretion, engaging with the market, coming up with new stuff that's going to fail, and that kind of thing. So that's one axis. And the other axis is going to be internal and external. So do we have a more external focus on the market? We are looking out at the market and seeing what's happening externally. Or do we have a kind of shorter timeline? That's one thing that's implied, looking externally, reacting very quickly to what's going on in the market. Or do we have a more internal way of looking at things, a more internal focus, a more process focus, maybe longer timelines, more long-term oriented. And with these two axes, well, you get this model that shows four cultures. Now, they're not only four cultures. Your culture in your company has something from every single one of these. You can also look into, different layers of culture. So you probably have an executive layer of culture, and that gives a certain flavor to the company. You probably have an engineers or a functional level, experts in certain areas. That probably gives a kind of culture, the culture within research and development within the bigger company may be slightly different. The culture within human resources within the whole company might have a different flavor, and they should, because within those areas they're doing more specialized stuff. And then you might have a third level, which is sort of the operational day-to-day. I would tend to call that climate. How do we deal with people day to day? We come in and we say hello. I was in a company recently and everybody there said hello to me. Now I live in the Netherlands and that's an odd thing. They didn't know who I was. It's not that Dutch people are not friendly, but it's not that they say, not everyone says hello to people in their company that they don't know. Well, these people did. It was part of their operational day-to-day culture. And that would be an example of that. But what I'm going to focus on is pretty much the top level. And that's really the culture that's going to make the difference when you link it with strategy or you link it with some sort of strategic change. So we've got this model. It's a lovely model, and it's pretty easy to get your head around. And as you look at it, you'll probably see, well, my company tends to go toward this or that culture, but I see aspects of probably all of them. Yeah, and that's totally correct. Yeah. Let's look at the cultures. I'll give you a couple of examples of companies that, sort of mirror those cultures. And then we will move on to how would you measure it? And then how might you actually operationalize what you get out of it? So as we're looking at this, where all of these cultures are good cultures to have, depending on your industry, depending on the situation within the industry. But every culture is out there to win in the marketplace. So we'll take the first one, and that's your upper left-hand corner. This is the Collaborate, or I like to call it the CLAN organization, the human relations focus. Here, your leaders are mentors and facilitators and the people who really have the company values. They just ooze the company values. It's got an internal focus. Yeah. So, and that internal focus means we are focusing on our people. The idea is if we focus on our people, we get them great training. We give them development opportunities. Then we will win in the marketplace. Yeah. Very often these kind of companies are could be family companies. Yeah. So you talk about clan and human relations. It could be a family company. Very, very easily. The experience that I have in these companies was at an NGO, Oxfam, in the Netherlands. So it's the Oxfam family, and this is the Netherlands branch of that, if you will. And what do you have here? You have do-gooders. These people want to go out, they want to do good in the world. They're not looking for money. Back when I was doing this, the directors were, a director's salary was 80,000 euros. Well, that's way below the market, way below the market. They were in 17 different countries doing all kinds of sometimes very dangerous work, messing with all kinds of very complex situations. But they were there to do good. They wanted to do good in the world. They wanted to bring education and sanitation and all kinds of things to people. And so the wages were actually quite low. You weren't there because you were trying to get rich. You were there because you could identify with the values of that company. And we had everything from sort of low-paid people all the way down to volunteers. That didn't stop people from complaining about our executive director's salary, which I think was 120,000, for a pretty big organization worldwide. It was just, a very small amount, but people still complained. But that might be an example of something that's mainly, not completely, but mainly in the clan or collaborate quadrant. Of course, there's going to be some control in there because they've got to get the money in, they've got to, track it, they've got to get it out to the countries, all that kind of thing. There's going to be some compete because they're not the only NGO looking for money from governments or from the Gates Foundation or the Ford Foundation or something like that. And they will need to do sort of new stuff. When I left the organization, they were starting with microfinancing and that kind of thing. So, they'll have little flavors of that, but if you look on balance, it's pretty much clan or collaborate. And if we get that right, and if we stick to our values, and our people are, feeling good about what they're doing, and they're well trained, and I remember walking down the hall and there was a coffee time, and I just sort of looked in this one room, and it was a mindfulness training. We're taking care of our people, we're giving them all the tools we think that they need. It was that kind of organization. So that might be an example of a collaborate organization, and you would see that, should see that back in all that they do. Upper right-hand corner, we have a create organization. The mindset here is, let's be first. Let's get out there. Let's be the first ones. The clan and collaborate organization was kind of, let's do things that last. Let's do things that are going to be around a while and that are worthwhile and valuable. The create organization is much more, let's do things quickly. Let's get something new and cool engaged in the market. So Google Glass as a product might fit here. This is a very R&D heavy, entrepreneur heavy, innovation heavy area. A lot of maybe tech startups or biomedical startups could be in here, but also gigantic companies like Apple, who have actually, kept marketing and development and all that innovation stuff in-house and farmed out the actual manufacture of their products to places like Foxconn. So their leaders are innovators. Their leaders are go-getters. Their leaders are people who are out there getting new sources of funding and all that kind of thing. Elon Musk probably falls in here with his ventures, SpaceX and Tesla and the Boring Company. All of those might fall within this area. Very exciting, very brittle. It could all collapse at any time, but let's keep going and let's keep moving. The idea here is, if we're out there and we're engaged and we're absolutely the first and we've got the coolest cutting edge stuff, then we're going to win in the market. Moving to the bottom of the market, and actually gravity sort of works on this model. You think gravity works on it? Yes, actually gravity seems to work on it. A lot of companies start in the top, a cool new product that we're making in my buddy's garage, or something I came up with in my house, and I've employed my family, and it's more about our values and that kind of thing. Whatever, they kind of start there, but then you start making money, and somebody says, "Oh, we have to pay taxes," or hey, somebody's copying us, and all of a sudden that market starts to open up, and you find out there are other people there, and now you're saying, "Wait a minute, people are going to try to take our clients, and we got to fight a little bit." And that's the bottom right hand corner. That's the compete corner. And here we're looking at EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. We're looking at profit. We're looking at product production maximization in a little crude way, kicking ass and taking names in the market because it's externally focused. Here the kind of leaders you get are directors and motivators and go-get-ems that kind of organization. This company is probably a company that you might want to own shares in, because they're out there, they're trying to get the stock price up. There's a very nice video of General Electric, and these videos that I'll talk about will be in the description. General Electric is, back when was they almost died, but it was a good example of this. We're either number one or number two in the market, and if we're not, we're out. When we do our performance evaluations, the lowest 10% of people are out, and that's how we keep getting all the best kind of people in, and all these things. It's like, wow, that is a real go-get-em kind of organization. And, one of the key things is, does this culture fit the strategy? And that's where culture comes in. Yeah. So does it fit the strategy? Is that really what you need? Would that work in Oxfam? Probably not. Does that work in Apple? But in a compete organization, that could be, the right flavor of thing to do. And of course you have to do it right. But that's where you might be. So as we start up here, the gravity starts to pull us down, and we see that we need to have much more of a compete component in there. But the bottom left-hand part of the model is control. Now, where compete might be, let's do things fast, and create might be, let's do things first, and clan or collaborate might be do things that last. Control is really focused on, let's do things right. Let's get the processes right. We've got Six Sigma. We're going to monitor it. We're going to have these perfect goals and this kind of thing. We're going to set the whole thing up. Very long-term orientation that you need here. Some interesting companies in this, a lot of manufacturing companies in here. Nuclear power plants, for example. I mean, you've got gigantic time horizons. You've got huge requirements for safety, and maintenance of these gigantic operations. They're very, very costly. They're very, very asset consuming, money intense financing that you need for these things, and it's got to be done exactly right. Airlines are very much like this. Airlines know, when we have sold 40 seats on this airplane, the 40, that's break even, and 41, now we're making money. I mean, it's down to just that. So we know exactly when we make money, and they usually lose money, and it's a terrible industry to be in, but it's a sexy industry to be in. So that keeps people coming. But very much probably in the control quadrant of the competing values framework. Now, probably, you got a feeling for where your company might fall within that area. But I did kind of mention, it needs to be linked with your strategy. And so if we look at the Tosti model, we've got this idea that, probably somewhere you've got a mission and a vision. A mission is just the general raison d'etre of your company. Why are we here? The vision is, what are we trying to do here in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? And that's what the strategy is. The strategy is a how. It's the how we're going to get that what of the vision. So if the vision is giving us a what, and maybe even a why, the strategy is giving us a how. It's going to talk about the how do we get there. And the two components that I think are most important here, at least in Tosti's model, are the strategic and the cultural. The cultural side, is you've got some kind of culture. It's a kind of a buildup of all the people and all the assumptions and all the personalities of your organization. And this leads to certain values. I don't mean values that somebody printed out and put on the wall. The actual values of your company. And you think, well, I'll take a little time out here and say, how would you find those? Don't go to human resources, because they'll give you the document. This is the document of our, 10 leadership values. They may be right, by the way. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that's just not really where you go, because they have very high percentage of the time they're going to be doing some sort of aspirational thing, and maybe not looking at how is it actually right here today. One of the best things that I found that you can look at is company agendas. So if you can get the executive team, the management teams, the functional management teams, and you can look at their agendas and you can say, what are they talking about? And where would that fall in the competing values framework? They're talking about finance. Well, that might fall into the compete quadrant. Okay, it depends on it. But in general, finance, making a profit, falls a little bit more there. Okay, what else are they talking about? Oh, here's some more finance. Okay. Here's capital expenditure. Okay. Here is market share. Oh, okay, all right. Here is, okay. So, we're really strongly in the compete area as far as what we do. So when management says, we're going to get together and spend our time talking about these things, these are the most important things, that's probably what your culture is. Now, if you ask people, when we get together, we should be talking about our people and our good things and yes, and help them along and all this kind of stuff. And the intentions may be good, but actually that may not be what you talk about. What is it that you actually talk about? And then that, you can drop that into the competing values framework and say, wow, we really talk just about compete stuff. But what we need to do is much more innovation, much more, we're already focused externally, we're getting after it, we're kicking ass and taking names, but we need much more of the innovation side, building new prototypes or these kind of things. That gives you an idea, this is where we are and this is the gap and here's where we need to be. And that's one way to find out what it is. I'll talk later about there's a survey that you can use as well, and that works very well. But the two in tandem, the survey plus what we actually are doing in the organization, is a really, really good indicator for that. So you've got a mission, you've got a vision. That's a what and maybe a why. And the how is going to be strategic and cultural. And the culture says, this is who we are. These are our values. That's going to lead to certain actions and ways of behaving. And hopefully that will lead to the right results. And that's called the driving path. Yeah, that's where are you getting your energy and motivation and focus and understanding from. On the other side, you've got the strategic side, and so you've got some kind of strategy, yeah, and this may be worked out in quite some detail. And this has probably processes and goals and KPIs and balanced scorecards and that kind of thing. That's great. And that leads you to do certain actions, and those certain actions should also lead to results. And that's called the guiding path. So culture is the driving path. Where do you get your motivation? The car, the horsepower that's taking you there. And the strategy is the guiding path, the map of how to get there. Now, and both of these hopefully will be leading to the same kind of results. There needs to be a match between there. There needs to be alignment. There needs to be coherence between the two. So if you're every day banging along with monitoring and KPIs and Six Sigma, and it's got to be exactly this, and we have 75 KPIs that we have to look at every day, that's probably in control in the bottom of the model. But if you need to be more innovative, and you need to give people more discretion and flexibility, and we need to fail now and again, that can make people a little bit nervous, So there really is something to culture. Peter Drucker said, is supposed to have said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yeah, if your strategy doesn't fit your culture will eat it. Yeah, it's the culture that is the hardest to change. Strategy is easy to change. You could make a strategy in a weekend. It may not be a great strategy, but you can put out a line and say we're going to go this direction generally, and these are going to be our KPIs, and these are going to be our goals. You could do that in a weekend. But changing a culture is going to take much longer, much more effort to do that. And it's getting the alignment and the coherence between the two that is the most robust. Yeah. So we need this robustness, and we can kind of see that in the Tosti model, link in the description as well. We see the culture, and we have idea of the different companies that may go along with that. So, for example, Zappos in the United States might be a culture or clan kind of organization. Oxfam, that also that kind of thing. Apple might be a good example of a create organization. GE might be a good example of a compete organization. And, Intel, ASML could be examples of control organizations. Also, Emerson, Fisher, Bodies, these kind of companies might fall in there, and that would be a good match for their strategy and their industry and their context. In other words, that would be aligned and coherent. Okay, so you've got this model. It gives you an idea of what kind of leaders you need. It gives you an idea of what kind of values you should be seeing. It gives you an idea of what you should be doing in your meetings, what's important in your meetings. It gives you an idea of what's important when dealing with clients and that kind of thing. It really gives a lot of guidance when these two things are matched up, strategy and culture. Well, how would you get deeper into the culture? Well, this will also be a link in the description. You would use the occupational culture, organizational culture assessment instrument, OCAI. The OCAI, and it's a pretty simple one-page thing to fill in. And it says, for example, what are the dominant characteristics of this organization? And so it gives you 4 statements. And one is, this organization is like a family. That would be collaborate. This organization is characterized by innovation and entrepreneurship. Create. This organization is characterized by a focus on financials and production schedules. Well, that could be compete. And this organization is focused on coordination and monitoring. Okay, so then you have 10 points, and you divide it between those, because there's not a place where you have 0 points. And that'll give you an idea of where the balance of your culture lies. And then there are 2 columns. One column is, what do we need it to be in order to match the strategy? So the assumption is you got a strategy. Here's our strategy. What kind of culture do we need to match that? Okay, well, what would be the ideal? And so you fill it in. What's the ideal culture? And within this culture, what is the ideal criteria of success? And then you have criteria of success for each of the 4. What is the ideal way of managing people? What is the ideal way of leading in this organization? And you go through 6 different sections like that. And then you can add these all up and get a very, very clear idea, a very good start to a discussion on these things just from that document. And then you can compare that to the analysis you may have done with the meetings and that kind of thing. When we're going to get together, what do we decide to spend our time on? And then see, hey, how much is a match? So you got the ideal, and then you say, well, what is it now? And of course, that gives you a gap. Yeah. So if you give a score of 4 of your 10 points go to plan or collaborate, but you got this really heavy innovation, more external focus. You may think, oh dear, is our strategy right? But let's assume it is. Then what do we need to do? Well, okay, there's a gap here. We had a 4 for clan and collaborate, and maybe a 2 for innovation and create and entrepreneurship and doing that kind of thing. Those 2 may need to switch. One may need to become a 4, create, and clan might need to become a 2. So then you also have the question of, what are we not going to do anymore? And that is really hard, really hard. What things are we going to leave behind? What customers are we going to leave behind? Oh dear, these are really difficult conversations. This is when you think, now I know what consultants are for, because if you try to lead these kind of difficult conversations in your own organization, you might be tempted not to push it as hard as it needs to be pushed. So you do an analysis internally, looking at meetings and that kind of thing. Then you might send out this survey, and then get people together in groups. Maybe if maybe you're just in one country, maybe you're in, let's just say Romania. So you're in Romania and all of your operations are there too. And let's say you've got 500 people in the business. Okay, well, you might get the management team together. You might get the production teams. You might get a headquarters team. I don't know, and at least get about 10%. Yeah, so if you get 500 people going through little workshops like this with 10% of the top people is probably enough. You may say, well, why not everyone? Well, you could, but we're all pushed for time. The people who really count when it comes to change in organizations and setting direction are in the top. That's just how it is. Don't do change from bottom up. That's not going to work. I would say kind of the top 10%, maybe, people who are real opinion leaders within the organization might be good as well to get in there, and have little groups. Let's say 5 workshops of 10 people that here are the results. Here's the ideal. This is the one that we think meets the strategy. So this is ideally where we are, but this culture as it is now is a little bit like this. So here's the gap. What do we need to do? You can do things like tell stories about, well, how did it used to be in this company? If you're in Romania, you can say, well, in the old days, we did it this way. But that was, just after the communist time. So, we had certain limitations, but we also had certain flexibility. And then then we started growing, and we've gone through this enormous expansion. And now we're getting to the point that, we're finding there's competition. There's competition coming from outside Romania. And, we've gone from more of a just sort of long-term internal clan collaborate. We all work here for 30 years or 40 years, and then when we retire, we've got to make this shift toward an external focus. And in order to get our strategy. So it's always got to be aligned. It's always got to be coherent, strategy and the culture. So that's what you're missing, that little Rubik's Cube maybe of strategy and culture together. That's kind of your job. 5 sessions, going through people, asking them how were things in the past, how are things now, and what would the future maybe look like? What should it look like? Be careful in that area, because sometimes people say, oh, it should be like Google and we should have a slide from the 3rd floor that goes down to the cantina, and let's keep it, let's keep it really focused. So that's a problem, at least that I have had in the past. And then you've got the data. Then you've got the data between, okay, what is our strategy? What is the culture that is aligned and coherent with that and will support it and not eat it? And now we work on those things. Your job as leaders will be to have a hand on the strategy and a hand on the culture, and keep those things from, one from pulling the other way. Keep that thing in balance as you go along. So it's the competing values framework that came from Robert Quinn back in the early 80s. Some of the best research I've seen, probably the best model for organizational culture. Really excellent, very usable. There's a debate about, is culture something that an organization is, or is it something that an organization has? Yeah. If it's just that it is, well, then you have an issue. Could you ever change it? Kind of like my skin color. Maybe I could do something. I could get in the sun more. I could stay completely out of the sun. But basically, my skin color is going to be the same. But if it's something an organization has, that implies that we can, get rid of it. Can maybe like a snake, we can sort of slough off some of that old skin, and we can move in a slightly different direction, slightly different flavor, slightly different color. And that's what the competing values framework does for you. It makes you choose. Yeah, are we more internal or external? We're both, right? But if where does the balance go? Yeah, are we more toward flexibility and discretion, or are we more toward control and focus? Well, we're both. Yeah, probably. But which one is the one that's most aligned and coherent with the strategy, with the industry, and the context that you're in? So that's how I would use the competing values framework. Really, really cool model, simple to use. People get their heads around it very, very quickly. And I wish you a lot of luck with it. And if you have questions, please feel free to email me or put a comment below the video. Thanks so much.